podcast is part of the Sports Social Podcast Network.
The Two-Footed Podcast is brought to you by EPLindex.com and our presenting sponsor, Liberty Shield. Liberty Shield is a VPN provider. A virtual privacy network allows you to go online, change your location, access things you're geo-blocked from, while keeping your data safe. So, as an example, if you are a UK expat and want access to BBC iPlayer to watch Match of the Day, or ITV Hub, or all four, but you get that message that says this content is not available in your location, a Liberty Shield VPN gets you around that block, allows you to watch whatever you want on those services while also keeping your data safe. And it goes further than that. It allows you to open up Netflix's entire library by just changing your IP address. Liberty Shield is the #1 rated VPN provider on Trustpilot with 5-star ratings across the board. So go to libertyshield.com right now, use the code EPL25 and get either the hardware package or the software package. The hardware package is a router that you plug into your existing router, and any item you want to change the IP address on, be it your phone or your television, you connect that to the new Liberty Shield router. All other items can remain connected to your existing router. There's also a software package which is instantly downloadable to your device and you can get using straight away. Again, libertyshield.com, EPL25 for 25% off at checkout. We're also brought to you by Home of Hopcroft, a giftware and homeware company located in Scotland but shipping worldwide. Check out homeofhopcroft.co.uk and do check out the EPL Index and Anfield Index shops, which you'll find on Etsy. Use the codes EPL10 or RED10 for 10% off at checkout. And lastly, do remember to check out A Tad Predictable, hosted by Tadiwa. That podcast is on this feed before every Premier League match week. Now, on with the show. What's good, boys and girls? Two-Footed Podcast. Today is Wednesday. It is September the 11th, and it is the 23rd anniversary of that tragic day when so many Americans lost their lives in a terrorist attack on their country. And we send our thoughts to all those who are still affected to this day by the events of September 11th, 2001. International football is over for another month. It'll be back in October, and then it'll rear its head again in November. But for now, it's something we can put to one side, and we can move on and enjoy the returning league action this weekend. So, some strange things happen during international breaks. And it's almost as if kids that live in this weird bubble start to discover that football actually has existed for many years. And then they start talking about eras of football that they clearly know nothing about, but they discover players for the first time. And it's quite a funny thing to see. And in the past week or so on social media, there's been Barclaysmen, players from the Barclays era of the Premier League, which, if you include the Barclay card sponsorship, basically runs from 2001, when Barclay card took over from Carling. Carling had become the sponsor in 1993. There was no sponsor the first year of the Premier League. Then it became the FA Carling Premiership. Then it became the FA Barclay Card Premiership. Then from 04 to 07, it was the FA Barclays Premiership. Then they realised that name didn't really sound good or work well. So from 07 to 2016, it was the Barclays Premier League. And then in 2016, with the Barclays sponsorship running out, the Premier League decided that they didn't want to have a sponsor. They wanted to have the name just be clearer, cleaner, a bit like the National Basketball Association or the National Football League. So they just went with Premier League. So the Barclays era really is 01 to 2016. Okay, that is the era. Now, many of these people who are bringing up Barclaysmen don't know anything about the game kind of pre-2010. Most of them know nothing pre-2015 because they're all about 14, but that's neither here nor there. It's great to see them discovering these older players. And it's great to see a lot of these older names being brought up and people talking about a certain goal that a player scored or a run of form or a season that a player had. And I thought today for our nostalgic corner, we'd spend 15 to 20 minutes just going through the seasons of the FA Barclaycard Premiership, the FA Barclays Premiership, and the Barclays Premier League, and picking out a couple of players per season who I would deem fitting for the tag Barclaysmen. So we'll start with the 01-02 season. Now, this does tend to be largely attacking players. Okay, defenders rarely get any love in this. So we're going to stick with that narrative. We're going to stick with attacking players primarily. And I think one that deserves to be mentioned here, who had a long career, and in 2001-2, he was voted the PFA Young Player of the Year. That's Craig Bellamy. I mean, Craig Bellamy is very fitting for the title Barclaysmen. I think he kind of, in a way, helps define a long era of the Premier League. So we'll throw him out there. We're also going to look, obviously, at some players that are underappreciated, some players that maybe for a season or two really performed at a high level. But we'll go through it. Eidur Gudjohnsen, there's a fella that absolutely embodies Barclaysmen. That's one of the most underrated players the Premier League has ever had. Absolutely outstanding for Chelsea. Despite all the money that they spent, he continued to find ways to get games and to play well. But of course, he came to England with Bolton Wanderers. Signed in 1998, played 2 seasons there, moved to Chelsea where he stayed for 6 seasons. He would come back to England with Spurs on loan, Stoke for a brief time, and then go to Fulham on loan. And then later on in 2014-15, he would land back at Bolton. But he had a very long career. He actually made his debut at 16, actually played with his father, both for club and country, I believe. Definitely for country. And I think he actually came on for his debut as a sub for his father. But he didn't retire until 2016, when he was 38. So 22-year career for him, 20 years in his national team, yet still only won 88 caps, but dealt with a lot of injuries. Like, he went to PSV very young. Him and R9 were the partnership. That was what they were hoping to build, was this partnership between this Brazilian sensation, who they knew would leave, and this Icelandic sort of attacking midfielder 10 type, who had like genius intelligence on the pitch. He suffered a horrendous ankle injury and he ended up going back to Iceland for a couple of years. Well, I think 1 year because he wasn't playing, he was injured, and then he went back to play, and then he ended up at Bolton. But Eidur Gudjohnsen, absolutely a Barclaysman. Marian Parhars, absolutely a Barclaysman. So now he begins his Premier League career in 98, 99, similar to Eidur Gudjohnsen. He signed by Southampton from Skonto in Latvia. Now, Southampton at this time have players like Klaus Lundigvam, Egil Olstenstad, Eyal Berkovic, I think, was there at that point. They'd signed this collection of players that no one had heard of because we didn't have easy access to the internet, let alone social media, YouTube, and all these different things. There was no Y-Scout or anything back then. So when these players would be signed, you wouldn't have any idea who they were. If you read World Soccer Magazine, you might have seen them mentioned every so often, but you wouldn't have ever seen them play. So Marion Powerhouse comes over. Remember as well, we have different transfer rules back then in terms of deadlines. So you could sign players, I think, right up until mid-February. No, mid-March. Mid-March, I think, back then. So he arrived, I think, in about March. Played 6 games, scores 3 goals. The next season he scores 13, and then he has a disappointing season where he scores 9. In the first season that we're looking at here, when the Barclay card sponsorship had begun, he scores 14 goals. And he was tremendous that year. And to be fair to him, he was really good in that first 3 and a bit years. Even the season where he only scored the 9 goals, his performance level was quite good. But he fell off a cliff after this 14-goal haul in 01-02. Only scored 4 more goals despite playing for the club for 4 more years. And it wasn't like he went on loan. He just couldn't stay fit. He played 36 games across 4 years. Just couldn't stay fit. But Marion Powerhouse was a really good player. He was the first Latvian player that any of us really became familiar with. Good movement, clever player, a bit on the short side, 5'8", 5'9", but absolutely tormented Premier League defenders when given the opportunity. So Marion Powerhouse, absolutely deserving of mention here. And I think we have to mention, though again, he'd come over pre-Barclays era, I think we have to mention Jimmy Floyd Hasselbank here. One of the ultimate old-school Premier League goal scorers. Joins Leeds in 97. He's brilliant for them. Absolutely brilliant for them. 22 goals the first year, 20 the second. He heads off to Atletico Madrid, does brilliantly there, scores 33 goals in a season. Chelsea spend big money to bring him back to England. He scores 26 and 41 in his first year. And then the second year is when the Barclays era kicks in. He scores 29 in 48. Now, that was his last truly great season. But he did have 5 more years, in the Premier League. 2 with Chelsea, 15 and 17 goals respectively. Then he went to Middlesbrough, scored 16 the first year, 17 the second year, including an outstanding performance in their European campaign. And then he went to Charlton and he played 29 games in all comps, scored 4 goals. The Premier League had left him at that point. He ends up going to Cardiff and, to his credit, scores 9 in 44. But his run in the Premier League absolutely warrants mention when we talk about Barclaysmen and what that means and who we're discussing here. You know, players that weren't superstars, but were really, really good players that had seasons or multiple seasons or, you know, these really high highs and then fell away. I think Jimmy Floyd Hasselbank, who again, when he joined Leeds, we didn't know who he was. He came from Boa Vista. He'd had a really strange career. Obviously Dutch, born in Suriname, comes through the academy at Telstar, goes to Alkmaar, flops, drops down to Nerlindia, don't know who they are, moves to Portugal, has a second move in Portugal to Boa Vista where he blows up, and then gets the Leeds move. We had no idea who he was. No clue. Leeds signed him for 2 million and nobody had any idea who the fellow was. And he was brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. So fair play to him. Right, we can leave that season then and we can move on to 02-03. Let's see. Okay, so again, we're ignoring kind of goalkeepers and defenders, so Brad Friedel won't count here. But I think Kieran Dyer has to count. Kieran Dyer had all the talent in the world and none of the brains to go with it. And despite being a very, very talented footballer and having a great start to his career, he just managed to make an absolute mess of things. But He did perform really well in this 02-03 season. He was also really good in 04-05. His best form had come kind of at Ipswich and in the early years at Newcastle, which are all pre-Barclays era. But I think Kieran Dyer just warrants mention. If for nothing else other than him getting in a fight on the pitch with one of his teammates. Which, you have that. I think Jermaine Genius is worthy of a mention here. A really, really talented footballer. Came through at Forest, went to Newcastle, ended up at Spurs. Supremely talented. Supremely talented. But injuries and I think just poor coaching meant that he never came close to being the player that he promised to be. Genuinely, when he broke through at Forest, the hype he was getting, age 18, 19, was similar enough to what Bellingham was getting at the same point in his career. Now, Bellingham, I think, is more talented. But Genius was super talented himself. And I think is a bit of a cautionary tale. James Beattie has to be considered a Barclays man. Breaks through at Blackburn, doesn't make the grade, goes to Southampton, scores 1 and 4 basically, but he's just an absolute unit of a centre forward. He's a very typical late 90s, early to mid 2000s Premier League number 9. And to his credit, he had a pretty long career. But he was a battering ram. Just an absolute battering ram of a footballer. He went to Southampton in part of the deal that brought Kevin Davies to Blackburn. Now, Kevin Davies, I don't think we're going to count here as a Barclays man, because really and truly, I think the best of him came pre-Premier League, or pre-Barclays. It was more the Carling era. But I suppose if you look at his second spell his spell at Bolton, not at Southampton, not second spell at Southampton, the spell at Bolton, under Big Sam, kind of feel like you'd have to include him a little bit. Another one of those big battering ram forwards who had more talent than they were ever given credit for, were better on the floor than they ever got given credit for, but ultimately were just seen as a big lump and would regularly spend their days having the ball fired in at their heads from all areas of the pitch. So yeah, we'll include both of them. I do think it's just funny with Beattie and with Davies. So they basically, it was 6 million in Beattie for Kevin Davies, and Kevin Davies didn't really work out at Blackburn at all. Whereas Beattie went on to Southampton, and it took him a couple of years to get up to speed, but ultimately did very well. I think they actually played together there for a year. Then he was pretty good at Everton. He was really good in the Championship when he dropped down with Sheffield United, and then not so good when he came back up into the Premier League with Stoke. He definitely hung around a little bit too long. We'll keep going to 03-04. I think there's some obvious ones, but Mikkel Forsell is a good one, I think. German-born but Finnish international, who came to the Premier League with Chelsea, had a bunch of loans all over the place, but he had a couple of good years with Birmingham. I think that spell at Birmingham kind of qualifies him for what we're looking at here. That short spell, with him it was a short spell. Sean Wright-Phillips has got to be considered prime Barclays. Breaks through at City, is unbelievably good for a couple of years. Unbelievably good. And everybody's convinced this is the next big English wing star. And Chelsea buy him for an absolute fortune. And he was fine there, but he definitely didn't live up to the billing. And then he went back to City and was much better again. It was just, again, peak Barclays. Good for QPR as well when he went there, and then obviously went to play in America for the New York Red Bulls, where his brother Bradley is sort of a legend. But yeah, would absolutely include Sean Wright-Phillips. JJ Okocha, I think you'd have to count here. Comes over to Bolton. Everybody knows him because everybody has seen him play for Nigeria. He's a big name. He's been, Eintracht Frankfurt, Fenerbahce, Paris Saint-Germain, and somehow he ends up at Bolton Wanderers. And he's only 29. It's not like he's washed. And he would just go on to do some of the most outrageous things you'd see on a football field. But as with a lot of players like him, he was best suited to that type of club where the team could be built around him and he could kind of play outside of the system. But JJ is one of the most entertaining players the game has ever had, and certainly one of the most entertaining players the Premier League has ever had. And he was undeniably brilliant for Bolton. Undeniably brilliant for Bolton. And to this day, clips of him are still getting shared here, there, and everywhere. He is the epitome of mid-2000s Barclays Premier League, or FA Barclays Premiership, as it was. Incredible. Absolutely incredible. Juan Pablo Angel. Anyone remember him? He comes over from River Plate. Now, River Plate are obviously a historic club and known for producing great players. So Villa signed him for in and around 9 million. Never played in Europe before. In and around 9 million. He's the guy who's gone to River from Atlético Nacional in Colombia to replace Hernan Crespo, who had left the year before to join Parma. And he went to River and he was phenomenally good for them. Outstanding for them. Took him a little bit of time to settle, but years 2 and 3, he's brilliant. He comes to Villa and he has one of the strangest careers you'll see. So he plays half his first season. He scores 1 goal in 11 appearances. The next season he gets 16 and 34, and people are fawning over him, lauding Villa for this incredibly good signing. The next season he gets 3 and 19. Now he has some injuries, but still 3 and 19 isn't very good. The next year he gets 23 and 39, and we're back to fawning. And Villa have a bagsman. This fella's going to get the goals. And then the next season, it's 9 and 38, 3 and 37, 7 in 27, and then he's off to MLS, where he banged in goals consistently for 4 years. But what a bizarre Premier League run. 1 in 11, 16 and 34, 3 and 19, 23 and 39, 9 and 38, 3 and 37, 7 in 27. But a really fun number 9. A really good player. No question, a really, really good player. One I always enjoyed watching, but yeah, didn't really live up to the billing on a consistent basis. The next player we have to mention here might be the ultimate in this regard. He might be the ultimate Barclaysman. Yakubu. Nobody knew who Yakubu was when he came to Portsmouth on loan from Maccabi Haifa. Harry Redknapp brings him in. How Harry Redknapp knew about him is anybody's guess. He comes in, and this guy just starts banging in goals left, right, and centre. 7 and 14. They sign him permanently, having been promoted to the Premier League. He goes 19 and 43, 16 and 35, gets the move to Middlesbrough, 19 and 57, 16 in 45, gets a move to Everton, 21 in 39, and then he falls off a cliff. Now, he's an injury-plagued 08-09 season, scores 5 in 17. The next season, he gets 6 in 36. The following season, he starts off disastrously, 1 in 15, gets sold in January to Leicester in the Championship, and rediscovers himself, bangs in 11 and 20. Then he gets sold to Blackburn, gets another crack at the Premier League, and just casually scores 18 goals in 33 games. And then heads off to China in search of riches new. Smashes goals over there. And then he just kind of drifted about. He passed his best. He did come back to England to play with both Reading and Coventry. Reading in the Championship, Coventry in League One, and didn't score. He actually didn't score a league goal for any of his last 3 seasons. One with Reading, what happens about half a season with Reading. One with Kayserispor in Turkey. He played 12 league games. And then with Coventry, he played 3 games. And that was kind of the end of him. But Yakubu, who came in from nowhere, no one had a clue who he was. He looked a little bit overweight, but he was outrageously good in front of goal. Absolutely outrageously good in front of goal. Sensational player. We move to the 04-05 season. We're not going to get through as many seasons as I thought we were because there's more of these to talk about, but maybe it's a little bit of a series we can continue further down the line. 04-05. I think Jose Antonio Reyes is a player that comes into this category, but maybe not. Maybe not. Andy Johnson, though, definitely comes into this category. So Andy Johnson comes through at Birmingham, lands at Crystal Palace, smashes goals in what we now call the Championship, gets 32 and 49 in the 03-04 season as Palace get promoted. And then the next season, his first year ever playing in the Premier League, he's 22 goals in 38 games. But Palace get relegated. And he goes down with them. Why he went down with them, I have no idea. How nobody saw fit to buy him after 22 goals in 38 games. 21 and 37 in the Premier League, by the way. He goes down to the Championship, scores 17 and 39, and earns a move to Everton. Gets 12 and 35, 10 and 39. Pretty good, not nearly as good as what he'd done at Palace. Moves to Fulham, has one good year, an injury-plagued year, a bad year, and another good year. Goes to QPR. It's a disaster. Sticks with them in the Championship. Doesn't go very well. Comes back to Palace. Couldn't stay fit for a lot of the last few years of his career. But that one season, that 04-05 season where he scores 21 Premier League goals, it was remarkable. And the fact that he went down and stayed at Palace is just insane. Like, imagine now, let's just say Elijah Adebayo had scored 21 Premier League goals last year for Luton. Does anyone think he'd still be playing in the Championship for Luton? Not a hope. Not a hope. That's all we'll do for that year. Let's move on. 05-06. Darren Bent, I think, categorises here quite well. But Kevin Nolan must be one of the ultimates. Just one of the ultimate Premier League players. Comes through the Bolton Academy, sticks there for years, probably too long in truth. Goes to Newcastle, does pretty well, goes to West Ham. Probably sticks a little bit too long at West Ham as well, to the point where he wasn't really contributing anymore. But like, as a goal-scoring midfielder, he was just tremendous. Like, you're looking at seasons where he gets, just in the Premier League, 8, 9, 9, 12, and 10 as a midfielder, playing for Bolton, Newcastle, and West Ham. Like, obviously, there's other seasons where he gets 1 or 4 or 3 or 7, which isn't actually too bad, to be fair. Like, if he'd been able to sustain it year after year with the goals, he certainly wouldn't have been playing for Bolton for a decade. But a very good player. Timing of runs was excellent. It's a shame he decided not to play for Ireland. He was overlooked at senior level by England, and Ireland could have had him, but he decided he wanted to play for England. So such is life. But always a goal threat, always someone you hated playing against. Just seemed like he was horrible to play against. Was always niggling and booting people, but yeah, a very, very good player. A very, very good player. Who else have we got here? I suppose we should... Darren Bent, I mentioned. Aaron Lennon was a good one. I'm going to have to throw in a defender, though. There's a defender here that has to be mentioned. Pascal Chimbonda just had one of the most random careers. So he's just happily toiling away in France. He's been at Le Havre. He's been at Bastia. He gets signed by Wigan Athletic in the summer of 2005. Goes on to win a spot in the PFA Team of the Year in the 2005-2006 season. Absolutely sensational for them. Spurs are like, oh, we need a new right back. We'll spend big money on him. Goes Spurs, dreadful. Largely dreadful. Spends 2 years there. They bid him off. He goes to Sunderland and flops, back to Spurs and flops. Sunderland might have been alone. Goes to Blackburn, wasn't good. Goes to QPR, Doncaster. 6 summers after being in the PFA Team of the Year, he is lining out for Market Drayton Town. Yeah. Market Drayton Town. He would then play a year in League One for Carlisle. Went back to France for a little while, came back to England, played with Washington, who were up in the Tyne and Wear area in the Northern Premier League Division 1. Played for Ashton Town in the Northwest Counties Football League Division 1 North. And then last season came out of retirement to play for Skelmersdale United in the Northwest Counties Football League Premier Division. So to his credit, like, he's kept himself in great shape because he's now 45 and still capable of playing games. He actually won a French cap as well. Oh, he was actually player manager last year. He was player manager and had to register himself as a player. That's brilliant. That's actually brilliant. So he agreed to manage, got a touchline ban, registered himself as a player so he could be on the bench to get around the touchline ban. Ends up playing 12 games. And then they got relegated and he got sacked. So, yeah, obviously not a good manager, but fair play to him. So he played for France once. And he played for Guadeloupe 6 times. He was actually in the squad for the 2006 World Cup. Now, he'd been brilliant, like I say, in that 05-06 season. But that is funny that he'd been capped by Guadeloupe, then went and played for France at the World Cup, and then went back and played for Guadeloupe again after that. Yeah, Pascal Chimbonda we have to mention there. We'll do one more season, I think, 06-07. Let me just get that fella open because I know I want to mention him. Don't want to overlook one specific player. Let's see. I mean, from an Irish point of view, Kevin Doyle absolutely warrants mention here. Was playing in the Irish League. Really good for Cork City. Went to Reading and was immediately excellent for them. Now, admittedly in the Championship, but he did really well in the Championship for them in 3 seasons. Not as great in the Premier League, but got a good move to Wolves and then was a really good player for Wolves for a few years. Not a big-time goal scorer, better off the striker, but worked like a dog, linked play really well, and just, was a good player. And a good player for Ireland as well, so fair play to him. But we have to mention here, as the last player we'll talk on today, Morten Gamst Pedersen. If ever a player kind of defines the Premier League, it's Morten Gamst Pedersen, who arrives at Blackburn from Tromsø, age 23, is awful. Absolutely awful to begin with. And then discovers that he has this absolute rocket launcher of a left foot. And was tremendous. Now, he was inconsistent, which is why he ended up spending so long with Blackburn. But there was multiple times in those first, say, 3.5 years where he easily could have gotten a move. Maybe not the first few months, but once he settled in, there was multiple occasions where he easily could have moved on to a bigger club. But he just had this incredible loyalty to Blackburn. And he ended up staying there from when he arrived in 2004-2005 season. He stayed there until the end of the 12-13 season, including getting relegated with them and going down and trying to help them get back up. Then he went and played in Turkey for a year. Then he went back to Norway. And he played for Rosenborg. He played for Tromsø. Played for Alta, who were in the 3rd division. Played then in the 2nd division for Asana and Ranham. He's only actually retired about 1.5 years. If even. A hell of a player. An absolute phenom of a left foot. Didn't score as many goals as he should have, but when he did score them, they were just worldies. Absolute worldies. Worked like a dog. I think if he came through now, Morten Gamst Pedersen would be a left back. And teams would lean more into his passing ability and his crossing ability. But Morten Gamst Pedersen absolutely warrants mention here. And we'll leave it there for this week's nostalgia, and I'll be back after the break.
Sports Social, now on the Sports Social Podcast Network.
We've got a brand new NFL season to enjoy, and that means all new episodes of The Nat Coombs Show, where I'm joined by some of the very best NFL broadcasters in the business.
Even when the roster is not stacked, he can still pull those wins out.
This dude accelerates through it. And I was like, did he really get through the hole that fast?
We get you up to speed on everything you need to know about America's game. The major news, big game previews, reaction to all the action, and plenty more besides. So join us for the ride. Just search The Nat Coombs Show on your podcast platform of choice.
Right, welcome back. So we'll carry on having a look at Champions League teams and their summer transfer windows. And today, we'll focus in on the German clubs. And there are 5 German clubs in the Champions League group stage this year because Germany, like Italy, got one of the additional spots. So let's start with league title winners, Bayer Leverkusen. Rampant last season, absolutely sensational form. This season, they weren't particularly good against Gladbach, but managed to get a late winner. And then they lost at home to Leipzig, which obviously is one defeat more than they had in the entirety of last year's league campaign. And the big thing was they kept Xabi Alonso. And big thing number 2 was they kept Florian Wirtz. Those are the most important things to happen to that club. In the transfer market, they lost Borja Iglesias, who didn't play much of a role last year, but Josip Stanisic did. He was very good on the loan from Bayern Munich. Patrick Pence was sold. Again, not someone that contributed to the title when he played last year on loan at Brøndby. He's made a permanent move to Brøndby. Timothy Fosu-Mensah didn't play last year. His career has kind of dwindled into nothing after being incredibly highly rated when he first came through at United. He's now without a club, 26 years of age. Someone will sign him. He's a good player, but he didn't play any games at all last season. Not one. And he watched his team win the league and the cup without him, and he wasn't entitled to any medals. That's rough. That's pretty rough. Sadr Osman was sold. He's gone to Shabab Ali in Dubai, I think. Yeah, Dubai. Adam Lozic was sold to Hoffenheim. He's very talented, but it just never really worked properly, especially under Alonso. He wasn't bought by Alonso. He was bought previous, and Alonso just couldn't find the fit for him. Gustavo Puerta was loaned to Hull, and Odilon Isunu was loaned to Atalanta. He's a player I do like very much. Not really understanding of why he was loaned out and Nordi Mukiele was loaned in. I don't really understand that. I think that's a bit of a downgrade for Leverkusen. They signed Martin Terrier for 20 million euro. I like him. I think he's a very good player. I think he fits the shape, the 3-4-2-1, very well. They signed Alex Garcia from Girona. Tremendous last season for Girona, vital in that team having the success that they had. They signed Andrea Natali, who's a young 16-year-old defender who'd been in the Barcelona academy. I assume Alonso was the driving force in that one. And they signed Jean-Noel Balachian, who's a super talented left-footed centre-back who can also play left-back, can also play in midfield. 19-year-old French underage international. I think he is going to be a big-time player. But my assumption was they were signing him because they thought they were selling Piero Hincapié. Instead, they kept Hincapié. And frankly, they kept everybody who was of real importance last year, including Jonathan Tah, who had agreed personal terms with Bayern, was quite open about the fact he wanted to leave. I thought they should have sold him. I would have sold him and kept Kasunu, and you could have still brought in Mukiele then. But they've kept pretty much everybody. And I think they've improved their squad. I think they've improved their squad without spending ridiculous money as well, which is hard when you're a league title winner. But they come out of this summer with a net spend in and around the 25 million euro mark. And I think that's good business. So it's an A-. There's no game-changing signings, I don't think. I think they're all good, really, really good depth signings. Like, I think Garcia's a really good midfielder. I'm not sure he starts for them when Palacios is back. But Balacion is a very good young defender, but again, he's not going to start for them. I just don't think Terrier starts as yet, but maybe he takes on one of the front three roles. Maybe he replaces Jonas Hoffmann in the best 11, possibly, and would be an upgrade, to be fair. I'll give them an A-. We'll go next to Bayern Munich, who had a very strange summer where they tried to hire 43 managers and failed to get any of them, and then ended up with Vincent Kompany, who they spent a fortune on. They spent some pretty big money this summer. They brought in Eric Dyer. Actually, let's start with the outgoings first. So, young Barry Hepburn left. They ripped United off for De Ligt. They sold Mazraoui for 15 million. I don't like the Mazraoui sale. I would have kept him. They loaned out Brian Saragossa. They sold a bunch of young players that were never going to play. Loaned out a bunch of other young players that were never going to play. They sold Malik Thielman, David Herold, and Jonas Schenk, who'd all been on loans with obligations to buy. And they released Choupo-Moting, who currently doesn't have a club. I assume he'll sign for somebody in Saudi. And Bouna Sarr, who they paid 10 million for a few years ago and was nothing short of a disaster. So coming in, the Brian Saragossa deal had been done earlier, but that counts for the summer. They signed Eric Dyer on a free. I don't know why. Nestori Irankunda of Adelaide United is signed. Now, you've probably seen the videos of him. He strikes the ball incredibly pure, generates amazing power, but he's a couple of years away from contributing anything. Hiroki Ito comes in. He can play a multitude of positions, centre-back, left-back, defensive midfield. I think they overpaid a little bit for him, but I think it was a release clause, so ultimately, if they wanted him, that's what they had to pay. They signed João Palhinha eventually. They got him at a decent price. It's a really good signing. It fills a massive need for them. And they signed Michael Elise, and I think that's one of the best signings anybody made all summer. I've always spoken about my admiration for Elise. I think he's an absolute superstar in the making. Last season, despite the injuries, he was just phenomenal. He's an elite-level creative player who's added goals to his game, and I can't wait to see him and Musiala play together. I think that is going to be ridiculous, having those two together. So, Elise alone makes it an A window for me. Elise is an incredible signing for them. Absolutely incredible. We'll do Dortmund and then we'll go to break and come back and do the last two. Dortmund, Royce, Hummels, Papadopoulos, Samba, Mori, and Marius Wolf all leave on freeze because their contracts are up. They lose Sancho and Maatsen, who'd been vital. They lose them because the loans are up. Ole Pullman is sold. Nicholas Füllkrug is sold. Tim Roth is sold. Aris Brunner is sold. They loan out Abdoulaye Kamara. No, they sold Abdoulaye Kamara, excuse me. And they loan out Solly Askan, Somali Koulibaly, Sebastian Haller, Yusufa Makoko, who, you remember a couple of years ago, they were making out he was the next big thing. Unfortunately, hasn't really worked out. They bring in Wladimir Anton, who had a really good season with Stuttgart last year, but I think they've overpaid. I know it's again a release clause like with Ito. I think it's an overpay. They bring in Guirassy. 18 million euro is a fair price. Now he is potentially a flash in the pan. Like last season is by far and away the best season he's ever had, and he's 28. So potentially a flash in the pan, but not a bad price. They signed Pascal Gross for 7 million euro. He's in his 30s now, but versatile, malleable, fits any style, any position. Good deal. Jan Kutu comes in. That'll be an upgrade at right back for them. I didn't like this window at all, but I really like the signing of Max Bayer. They've paid big money to get him, but I think he's going to be a top player in the years to come. Only 21, versatile, fits into most styles of play. I think Füllkrug and Haller out, Guirassy and Bayer in is an upgrade. I think they've upgraded that front line. I don't think they've upgraded anywhere else, though. Like, Gross is a really good squad addition. Anton, for me, I mean, look, he's replacing Hummels, and it was the ghost of Hummels, but I still think it's a bit of push. Coutu's decent, he's a good right back, but they lose Ian Maatsen at left back, and they lose Sancho. So, overall, I think it's about a push window. I'm going to give them a B. And I'll be back after the break. See you in a sec. Right, welcome back. So, we have RB Leipzig up next. They always have interesting transfer windows. So, they sell Angelino to Roma. He'd been there. It was a loan with an obligation to buy. They loan out Timo Werner for another year. They loan Iliax Moriba, one of the most disappointing players in Europe over the last couple of years. And then they sell Dani Olmo, and Mohamed Simikin. They got a great price on Simikin, a £20 million footballer. They sold him to Al Nazir for €45 million. I think the price on Olmo is fair enough. You know, from their point of view, I think they've done well. Coming in, Martin van der Voort is the young goalkeeper they signed, I want to say 2 years ago. They agreed this deal. He's been at Genk. This kid looks phenomenal. He really does. He's 22 years of age now. I think he's going to be a top goalkeeper. Now, we know Belgium produces top goalkeepers. Other than the unfortunate Mignolet era, Belgium have generally always had good goalkeepers. Maybe not always, but like you look back, Faf, Prudhomme, they always had pretty solid citizens in goal. Recent years, obviously, Courtois. I think Mike Penders is a good goalkeeper. I really like the guy, what's his name now? He went to Benfica. Was he at Roma last year? I think it's Roma 23, 24. I want to say he was at Roma last year. No, I've got that wrong. Where was he? Where was he playing that? I can't even think of the guy's name. Let's see. Benfica, he was there, I think, 2021 is the year he moved there, or the year after he moved there. Yeah, Milos Svilar. Yeah, he plays for Roma. I don't know why I missed him when I looked at the Roma squad. Milos Svilar. I like Milos Svilar. I think he's a talented goalkeeper. I think he moved too early. I think he struggled with the pressure and expectation of Benfica. But I think he's a good goalkeeper. And if it were me, I'd probably be picking him to play for Roma over the likes of Rui Patricio or whoever else they have there. Matthew Ryan, not very good. Oh, do you know what? Do you know what it is? He's playing for Serbia now. I looked for a Belgian flag. He got capped by Serbia. I know I've talked about that before. But yeah, I mean, he's another young Belgian keeper. Anyway, it doesn't matter. But Martin van der Voort, outstanding signing. Assan Abregu, the young midfielder from Schalke, big, powerful box-to-box talent. Very, very good. Very, very good. He's going to be a top player. I think that's another really good signing. Yet another one they'll get into the lab and develop. They get Xavi Simons on loan. I think he's overrated, but getting him on loan, I think, is a really good deal. They bring in Antonio Nusa, who's super talented. I should say, I think Simons is overrated. I still think he's very talented. Anyway, they bring in Antonio Nusa. He almost went to Brentford, but failed a medical. Leipzig have decided to bring him in. I think he's going to be another big player for them. Lacherel Gertruda, he's all right. He's a good defender. He's versatile. He fills the need left by Simikin. That's the be-all, the end-all. And then Arthur Vermeeren, who's very, very good. So he was at Royal Antwerp, moved to Atleti in January, and I'm really not sure what's gone on, but he's gone to Leipzig now on a loan with an obligation to buy if certain appearance numbers are hit. I don't know why Atleti have just given up on him so quickly. I think it's one of the most strange things I've seen. He potentially is the best of the bunch here. I think this is a really good window. I think they've had a tremendous window. Genuinely. They've made a huge profit. They'll take a little bit of a hit without Olmo, but I think overall they've improved the squad. Like Gertruda for Simikin, it's a push. Replacing Olmo with Nusa is obviously a downgrade, but I think the upside is significant. You improve your midfield options with Odrago and Vermeeren. You bring back Xavi Simons, who obviously had a successful loan there last season, and you improve your goalkeeping situation. It's an A+ window. Overall, it's an A+ window. To do all of that, while making a huge profit. It's an A+ window. And finally, Stuttgart. Now, they got decimated. Ito gone. Anton gone. Guirassy gone. That was 3 vital starters for them. They're starting centre-backs for the beginning. But I think they've done all right. Now, what I will say is they've overpaid, right, on a couple of players. They've overpaid for Dennis Undav. But he was really good for them there on loan last season. So I think they had to overpay for him. He got 18 league goals last season. I think they had to overpay to get him. Brighton were obviously playing hardball. He's a very good goal scorer at the Bundesliga level based on what we saw last season. So it's fine to overpay. They signed Demirovic, who was at Augsburg last year and had a really good year for them, the Bosnian striker. I think they've overpaid a bit for him. But again, I think they had to because they lost Guirassy. So I'm fine with them overpaying for him. They bring in El Bilal Toure on loan. I think that's a really good signing. Gives them depth in attack. I think that helps. Now, my concern is with replacing the centre-backs who left. So they bring in Emil Aldakil from Burnley. Not a starter for me. I wouldn't have him marked as a starter for the season ahead. You bring in Jeff Chabot, who last season was playing for Cologne. He's been around. He's bounced around for a number of years. You know, he came through at Leipzig, went to Sparta Rotterdam, Groningen, Sampdoria. Didn't really work out there. Went to Spezia, Cologne on loan, and then ended up at Cologne. He's a solid defender. He's a solid defender. I think he could replace Anton for what you want. Is he as good? Maybe not quite, but he's a little bit younger. So, is he the same? I think he's 2 years younger. Anyway, I think he's going to be fine. But he's not an upgrade, and they're going to be upgrading into the Champions League this season. They signed Anthony Rowalds from Toulouse. He was with them last season on loan. Was important to them. I think that's fine to keep him. Leonidas Sturgeon is the one that potentially improves them. He's been at St. Gallen for, I think, 5 years in their first team. He joined last season on loan. I think he looked really good for Stuttgart when he played. And I think given he's only 22, he turns 23 in March, I think he's got a huge ceiling. I think he's one that could develop into an outstanding defender in that Stuttgart team. So he's one to keep an eye on. Who else they bring in? Jamie Lewilling of Union Berlin comes in, play as a winger, can play as an attacking 10. He was with them again last season on loan as well, so they wanted to make that deal permanent. They've done a good job, I think, at keeping a lot of the players that were there last year, but again, you do lose 3 big starters, and that is just very, very hard to overcome. Now, they've bought well. Like I said, I think they overpaid on Demirovic and on Undav, but I think they've made up for it with good deal. Like Sturgeon for 2 million is ridiculous value. Genuinely ridiculous value. They get Alexander Nubel in on loan again. Was excellent for them last year. I would hope that becomes a permanent deal. He's been loaned for 2 more seasons. So that will be 4 years on loan for him. He's 27. He'll be 29. Actually, he's 28 in a couple of weeks. He'll be 30 when that loan runs out. And having been signed by Bayern in the summer of 2020, he'll have played 4 games. So he had 2 years on loan at Monaco, and it'll be 3 years on loan at Stuttgart. So that's actually 5 years on loan. 5 years on loan. He thought he was going to Bayern to be first choice. Overall, I'll give them a B. I worry about the impact of the players that have left. And they haven't started well. Lost on the opening day away to Freiburg, drew at home to a fairly mediocre Mainz team. The defence is going to need time to sort itself out. While I'm not a huge fan of Anton or Ito, they worked really well as a partnership. And I'm just really curious to see this year how Sebastian Hoeneß does when teams are more prepared for him. You know? Anyway, that'll do me for this episode of the Two-Footed Podcast. If you are looking to buy a cricket website or a MMA website or a boxing website, do get in touch with the good folks at Anfield Index, as there are 2 established websites with established reader bases, Fight Fever and Cricket Index, which are now available and have podcasting opportunities linked to them. So get in touch with the good people at Anfield Index, anfieldindex@gmail.com. They are also up for sale on eBay. So if you want to go and have a look, if you've got any interest in taking on some projects and maybe trying to build yourself a platform in those kind of fields, do get in touch. I'll be back later today with Two-Footed Extra. Take care of yourselves. Bye-bye.
This podcast is part of the Sports Social Podcast Network.